A withdrawal request is not a withdrawal. It is an intention. It may be reviewed, approved, logged, and queued. But the withdrawal becomes real only when the exchange or custody platform releases value. That is the moment that matters. Before release, many things can still change. The customer's authority, the account state, the recipient risk, the transaction pattern, the operating environment. A request that looked ordinary at the start may no longer be ordinary by the time value is about to leave the platform. This is where VASP governance becomes harder than approval governance. An approval record can show that permission existed at one point in time. An AML review can show what was known at the time of review. A transaction log can show what eventually happened. A policy document can show what should have been checked. All of these matter. But none of them fully answers the narrower operational question: was this withdrawal still eligible to be released at the moment value actually left? That is not the question of whether the user clicked, whether a workflow was completed, or whether a rule once passed. It is the release time question. At that point, governance has to bind four things together: current authority, current state, current conditions, current operating environment. Current authority asks whether the person, account, role, or approval path still has the authority to release value. Current state asks whether the account, wallet, balance, behavior, or transaction pattern still supports release. Current conditions ask whether any risk signal, escalation, delay, hold, or review requirement has changed. Current operating environment asks whether the platform, recipient, channel, or market context has drifted. In digital asset systems, this distinction matters because value movement is difficult to reverse. Once value leaves the platform, the governance question changes. Before release, the question is eligibility. After release, the question becomes reconstruction. Why did it go out? Who allowed it? What signals were available? Which conditions were current? Was the approval still valid? Was the recipient still acceptable? Was the release still inside the intended boundary? The cost of answering those questions after the fact can be high, not only because of loss, but because the organization must reconstruct why a specific movement of value was allowed at a specific moment. That burden is not solved by having more logs alone. Logs can show sequence, they do not automatically prove eligibility. A withdrawal can be logged and still be wrong. A release can follow a complete workflow and still be poorly bounded. This is the execution boundary for VASPs. It sits close to the withdrawal API, close to custody release, close to the moment where an internal approval becomes an external movement of value. That boundary does not replace AML, transaction monitoring, or custody controls. It asks a narrower question before the action becomes real: is this release still eligible now? That is the difference between approval governance and execution governance. Approval says permission existed. Execution governance asks whether that permission still holds at the moment value is about to move. For VASPs, that moment is not abstract. It is the release moment. And a withdrawal request is not a withdrawal until value leaves.